missing, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I went from like basically losing my whole family. And that really was, like you had mentioned, my origin story where I was completely dysregulated. I call that like the big rupture moment. And really the start, I think, of any healing journey starts with like a really big rupture or like a coming of awareness of like, oh gosh, okay, there's a lot here. And I took about 5 years trying to run from my pain and bury it through food, through avoiding my emotions, and all of the stuff that I was avoiding and repressing started coming out as physical symptoms. I had migraines, I had back pain. I still refused to talk about it because I didn't understand that my physical symptoms, my digestive issues, my physical pain was connected with my emotional health. And as I discovered nutrition, I started changing my diet, saw a lot of movement in my physical symptoms. But I found that working on the nervous system piece has been a really huge missing link for me.
Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in because your next breakthrough starts right now. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Miriam Jacobson, and she is a triple board certified functional medicine dietitian with 15 plus years of experience helping people improve their physical, mental well-being through food, mindset, lifestyle, breathwork, and somatic treatment so they can feel more alive in their bodies. Her healing practice is really influenced by her personal journey of losing her father to 9/11 when she was just 13, being poisoned by pollutants from the Twin Towers falling, and then surviving breast cancer. She is writing a personal memoir on healing through trauma. She's also the founder of Every Body Bliss, and her holistic healing approach challenges current medical narratives by examining physiological, biochemical, social, and emotional factors to resolve underlying mystery symptoms of poor digestion and fatigue and mood imbalances. And today we are covering all of that, and we are really talking about trauma and all of these different aspects of trauma, how this impacts our physical, mental, biochemical, social, emotional health. We're going to dive into Miriam's personal journey through losing her dad on 9/11, dealing with her mom's cancer diagnoses, her own. She's been through so much. And so there is a lot here to learn about resiliency, physically, mentally, emotionally, and really how all of this, the things we experience in life, trauma, emotional experiences, our physical health, and really what it looks like to find actual freedom and peace in our body and in our mind. This is such a good conversation and such an important one. So let's jump in. All right, y'all. I'm here with Miriam. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miriam.
Thank you so much, Hope. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Me too. I'm excited for this conversation. And as we were saying before I hit record, we have so much in common in the functional medicine world. So I feel like this conversation is going to be just perfect. So I would love to start off with, because I feel like you have such a unique story, personal story, and assuming that this has a lot to do with you going down the functional medicine route. As I say with all my guests, I'd love to hear the origin story because I feel like it all starts with our own personal story, right? To get to, the area that we're working in. So I would love for you to start with your story, which I'm sure there's more, but I feel like the big piece is starting with the 9/11 piece, which is a big deal. So yeah, I'd love for you to share that part.
Yeah. So when I was 13 years old, my dad worked on the 110th floor of One World Trade, and he died that day. And like I said, I was so young and I didn't really have any of the tools or resources to support my nervous system. And about 3 weeks after my dad went missing, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I went from like basically losing my whole family. And that really was, like you had mentioned, my origin story where I was completely dysregulated. I call that like the big rupture moment. And really the start, I think, of any healing journey starts with like a really big rupture or like a coming of awareness of like, oh gosh, okay, there's a lot here. And I took about 5 years trying to run from my pain and bury it through food, through avoiding my emotions, and all of the stuff that I was avoiding and repressing started coming out as physical symptoms. I had migraines, I had back pain. I still refused to talk about it because I didn't understand that my physical symptoms, my digestive issues, my physical pain was connected with my emotional health. And as I discovered nutrition, I started changing my diet, saw a lot of movement in my physical symptoms. But I found that working on the nervous system piece has been a really huge missing link for me. And so I'd say the unfolding of that journey has come in layers, has been like, I have some PTSD I really need to work with. And I, am holding in my body, right? I'm really not eating well. I'm making bad food choices because it's soothing for my brain, but it's only super momentarily, right? And that's leaving me sick on the other side of those food choices. And then as I have gone through my trauma journey, I've experienced more loss, and my mom died in my 20s. I had breast cancer. And, it really taught me how I was holding on to that stress on a nervous system, on a somatic, on a body level. And that's really through that process, I found breath work. And that was a really big missing link for me to bridge the physical and the energetic, and really helping my body move through some of those blocks that I couldn't think my way through and that I couldn't eat my way through. So I know that, Hope, you're someone who's really grounded in the multidisciplinary approach of mind, body, soul. And that really does mirror my own journey too. So I know that I'm in good company.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And we talk about this all the time, that these missing pieces are often that, that mental, spiritual, energetic side of things. We all want the physical symptoms to go away, right? And that's what we're experiencing on a 3D level. But as you and I both know, and listeners know, because they've heard me talk about it enough, that's not where it starts. And so I think there's something to be said there. So when you were dealing with, processing what happened with your dad and what happened after 9/11 and all of that, was there a moment where you realized oh, this is why I'm, having all these physical symptoms? Or was it years and years later where you kind of put the pieces to how long, I guess, what were you dealing with the symptoms before you finally realized this was the kind of missing link?
I mean, it took me a while. I'm sure my mom was more aware of what was going on than I was, because pretty immediately after my dad died and my mom got sick and was in the hospital, I was having really bad migraines, 3 days a week, which is not really normal for a 13-year-old girl.
No kidding.
But my mom tried to get me to go to therapy. So I think she always understood that mind-body connection. She was taking me to yoga when I was 12 years old.
That's awesome.
But I refused to talk about it, right? Because I wasn't in a place that was actually safe for me to unpack it. And so what she did get me to agree on was going to a chiropractor and going acupuncture. And so I did deal with those things on a body level when I was 13. But for me, it was a unfolding of it, where once I went to college, people started asking me about 9/11 because I was in college in the Midwest. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're a New Yorker. I thought it was so cool. And I was like, yeah, I'm from Manhattan. So cool. And then they were like, oh my gosh, where were you at 9/11? And that's when I started to understand that the anxiety, that full panic attack that I would have every single time someone brought up 9/11, I was like, oh, that's connected. And so that's when I really went to my mom and I was like, fine, I'll do therapy if it's going to really go away. And I think what you said earlier was really poignant about, our bodies speak. And that's usually the first symptom that we can acknowledge and that we really see, because so many of us, and so many high achieving women, right, are so good at repressing it, just getting it done and just powering through and just getting to the other side. And I don't think we realize how much that actually can make us ill as well in the process.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and especially with, I think that's the other thing for people to understand about trauma, and I'd love for you to speak on this too, is yes, you said, I forgot the verbiage you used, but it was that pivotal moment for you, whatever, I forget how you named it, but it was that catalyst, right? That kind of set it off. But I think sometimes people also don't understand when we have, because sometimes you do have like that one moment that sets it off. Like it's a really traumatic thing. It's like a big T trauma kind of thing. Like yours was obviously big T trauma. But when we don't like manage the effects of that in the body, then it gets pushed down, right? But then all these other things get piled on top. So it's like garbage on top of garbage. And so now it's like all these other little T traumas get stacked on top of the big T trauma. So it's like an excavation like experience to get down to it. So it's not like just one thing. And I think that's what sometimes people think like, yeah, I've healed that part of me. And they think that that's it. It's done. But it's like it's a process to kind of peel back the layers, and there's other things. And then, like you said, you've experienced all these other things since that pivotal moment. So there's a lot to heal from. It's just a multi-layered thing.
Absolutely. It's super multi-layered and it's so complicated. And I think there's a difference between the stress and the trauma. I think so many of us are experiencing stress on a daily basis and we are just trying to power through and we're trying to get it done. Like it's not always time to unpack things and you have to like get your kids out the door and like you have a deadline going on, Yes. But I think, oftentimes like we don't actually process what's there and that's what leads us to burning out when we repress it. So there are certain things that help our bodies have like an outlet for stress, which we can talk about. And then, but also trauma is different than stress because those memories are stored in a different way in our brains and in our bodies. And when we experience trauma, whether it's big T or little t, whatever brand of that is, when we're reminded of that, it's not just a memory, it's like we're reliving it in our body. So that entire stress response is re-triggered and our body goes through that same physiological stress. And so if we don't actually address it, you're right, it does interweave into new experiences. And I always say like healing is a lifelong journey because we're constantly having new experiences and those new experiences challenge us to look at our grief and look at our trauma and metabolize those past lived experiences in different ways. Like, for example, when I went through my breast cancer diagnosis at 31 years old, I felt so much grief for my mom. And I didn't really understand what was going on. And then, at that time, I had already been in the healing world for so long. And I was just like, wow, like I didn't understand, or I did understand it, but I was experiencing it again in a new way, how much our grief can be re-triggered and the trauma can be re-triggered. So it's just a really interesting thing when we realize like how layered those pieces are. And also that it's not like a lost cause. We have so much capacity for healing and for supporting ourselves through those experiences.
Hey, y'all, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, let me ask you this. You've built a vision that others admire. And you've built something that you're really proud of. But behind the scenes, your body feels like it's lagging behind. It just can't quite catch up to your brilliance and your mission that you have. That late night second wind, the foggy mornings, the hormone shifts, the endless push and forcing. You can't strategize your way out of that. And you already know you don't need more supplements. You don't need another supplement stack. You also don't need another side hustle disguised as self-care because nobody wants to have their health as a side hustle. This is about recalibrating your entire ecosystem. And that's why I created the Quantum Reset, a premium 3-month high-touch healing experience for visionary women who are ready to feel as powerful in their bodies as they do in their business. Inside, we decode your nervous system, your minerals, your hormones. We read your labs like the sacred text that it is, so we have actual answers. And then we pair that with deep energetic recalibration, subconscious release. We use gene keys, we use human design, and true embodied healing. This isn't about fixing burnout, because that's not what we're doing here. This is about becoming the woman whose body is powerful, whose body is completely electric, whose energy, clarity, radiance finally matches the size of her mission. If you know your success isn't meant to cost you your vitality and you're ready for a science-backed, spirit-led reset, then the Quantum Reset is your invitation. So check the link in the show notes or send me a message on Instagram and let's bring your body back online with your brilliance. Now let's get back to the show.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good point too. And I think I've said this before on the show. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he talks about how a memory without an emotion is wisdom. And I think that's a really good sign of the work that you've done, like the inner work that you've done, where you can think about, like you're talking about your mom, you've lost your mom and you've lost your dad, and you're able to talk about it in kind of a, an objective way where it doesn't trigger. And I'm sure sometimes, you have a memory that does trigger an emotion, but I think that is a good sign of, like, you quote, doing the work, is you're able to think about these experiences and think about those events, and it doesn't necessarily like make you fall apart. And then like you mentioned, like you were in college, and so to mention 9/11, you're like, holy cow, like why am I reacting like this? So I think it's a good sign. And I love too that the difference you brought up between stress and trauma, because I think that's such a good distinction. And I think a lot of times we kind of lump it all together because, I mean, it can have similar physiological effects in the body, but those are two different things. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, they are. And I think, I think so many times where we can get in trouble in our world is, so all of us have trauma, right? Like you can't be in 2025 without having lived through something, whether it's collective or individual. And I think that so many times what I see is people wanting to let those experiences like define them. I've been really interested and curious about this because I'm like, I don't see that experience defining me, but I've seen it as something that I can grow through.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of times what I witness is that we're like, oh, I have trauma. And so it's like, that's the excuse for not healing.
Yep.
And that's the excuse for like hiding behind something. But when we do really have a tremendous capacity, and that's like, if I can like give listeners one little tidbit from today, like that's it. Like you have full autonomy and it is possible to heal.
Yes, 100%. And I agree. And I think, I experienced that a lot too with a lot of clients that have had a specific diagnosis, and that becomes their identity. And there's a lot of untangling and rewiring that has to happen around that, because like in order to heal, you have to let go of that identity, like that you've attached to yourself. And so there's like a death and rebirth process. And I think it's the same with the trauma. Like we have to let go of that part of us and for it to no longer define us and to be able to move forward and heal. So I think that's such a good point that you brought up. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, I took a note when you're saying it. You mentioned, because I want to go back to it. You mentioned outlets for stress, and I wanted you to go back to that. If you can speak to your tips for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are certain ways that our bodies release and process stress. And so like, if you think about your body as a bucket, there's like a spout coming into the bucket, filling up with water. And then there's like a little spout on the bottom, that has like water coming out. Think of this like as our ways our bodies hold stress. And so if the bucket overflows, like if there's so much water coming in and there's not water flowing out, our bucket can overflow. And that's when we burn out. That's when you have something like the migraines and like the physical symptoms, maybe some of the joint pain, some inflammation. And so the idea behind processing stress is like supporting the outflow of water from that bucket. And so all the things that I'm going to share with you are supporting that outflow and helping lower those water levels so that we're not like overflowing all the time. And so those different ways that our body can do this things are great for us to do. Like any sort of art, any sort of like coloring, anything with your hands, any sort of like play, like art for the sake of making art. That's a great one. I don't even know why I started with that one because that's not the best one to do. Because one of the best ways to self-regulate is through your breath. So that's like usually my number one thing that I would recommend for people. And there's different ways that you can utilize your breath to process stress. One way that you can do that is by slowing down like your exhales. And if you really slow down your exhales and you channel your breathing through your nose, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest nervous system. And so that can be really helpful if you're like in traffic or if you're standing in the grocery line or you're like having an argument and you feel your stress level is rising. You can remind yourself like, okay, like, am I holding my breath? Is it getting caught up here? Am I feeling anxious? Remind yourself to exhale, because usually most of us get in that like inhale. There's also active types of breath work that I really like to do. that actually activate your stress response and allows your body to like complete those stress cycles, which looks really different than the grounding breath work. Some other things that are really helpful for grounding your nervous system and releasing stress are being with your people. Connecting with other people, that's one of the best ways to regulate your nervous system. Having a meal with loved ones, hugging someone, like hugging your partner or a trusted friend for 20 seconds has been proven by research to improve oxytocin levels, which is that bonding hormone, and reduce cortisol. Same effect happens when you like have a 6-second, like super juicy kiss with your partner. What else? Getting into nature, putting like your feet into the sand or getting into your garden, put your hands into the dirt, or honestly, just like stepping outside and feeling the wind on your face and the sun on your skin. Those negative ions help to improve serotonin levels. So all of these strategies that are like, oh, that's like a little woo-woo, like hugging my partner. Those are all backed by science.
Yeah, for sure. I believe it.
So we have a tremendous capacity, and it doesn't take that long.
Yeah, that's it.
To do any of these things.
Yeah, and they're all accessible, like simple. We all have to breathe. So why not just breathe in a specific way? Like, we all have people in our lives that we could spend time with. We all could go outside. Like I love that all of those are super accessible.
And free.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I would also, I posted this a while back. If you have, if you have a toddler at home, I feel like nothing boosts your happy hormone levels than hugging a toddler. Like, I don't know if there's anything better than a toddler hug. I posted about it a while back because I'm like, they're just so innocent and pure and like genuine. So anyway, if you have a toddler around or go steal somebody's toddler, give it a hug. Like, it's the best. But I have a whole episode a while back that we talked about grounding and like getting outside, putting your feet in the ground and how that does. And I talked about the science there because there is science around connecting with the earth and the earth's electromagnetic field. And I think a lot of times when it comes to, managing stress and dealing with trauma, like, yes, it can be, it's what the trauma, especially, it can be complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, I think we overcomplicate it a lot of times. Like everything you just listed, like you said, it's free and everybody has access to it. So nothing is super complicated. I think it's just, taking the time to do that. So when you, I know you mentioned breathwork was a big tool for you. So with the breath work for you, was it more supportive, that activating breath for you to deal with your trauma, or is it more of that like calming, sympathetic, parasympathetic breath that helps? Like, which one for you was more potent?
I would say the most earth-shattering breathwork experience that I've had is a very like activating experience. I remember like the first time I was in breathwork, like laying down, and I was in this room with like a bunch of other people, and like people are like, with people I really respected, and like they're crying and they're moaning and they're making sounds, and I was like, what is this? And I was so tense and I wasn't letting myself go. And finally I was just like, you know what? I respect all these people so much, and they're letting themselves experience it. So there has to be something here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just leaned in and I started breathing, and like in a more intense, deep way. And all of a sudden, like I was having flashbacks to things, like I was having a waking dream of things that were coming back to me from like 20 years earlier. And I had epiphanies of things that I thought that I healed, that I was like, oh, this isn't healed yet. And it really brought up areas of my life that needed more like TLC and that needed more attention. And that has been single-handedly like one of the most connected spiritual experiences I have felt to date. Because of it, I've actually become a breathwork facilitator myself.
Amazing.
So, yeah. And so for me, doing breathwork feels like going to temple. Like it feels like a religious experience in the way that it helps me connect with myself and my own intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe it. I've been doing breathwork for a while now and been in this group for a while where we do breathwork sessions a couple times a month together collectively, which is also cool. Like you said, like doing it with the collective energy is also really powerful. But it's the, we're doing the holotropic breath. Like that's the breath that we're focusing on. And I agree. I think, because the thing is with breathwork, people don't understand the power of when you have a what's the word I'm trying to use? When you have a specific way that you're trying to focus on breathing, like when you're actually doing intentional breath work, and especially doing the holotropic breath, like it activates the parts of your brain, like you're having an experience with like a psychedelic drug. It's like the same chemicals in your brain get activated. So it can be this, like you're saying, this kind of out of body dream, like, divine experience. People see all kinds of things when they do this breath. So I think we really do underestimate the power that our own bodies have to help us heal. Like, I think that in and of itself is like one of the most powerful ways. I just think we really underestimate the power that we have in our own body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I'm someone who tends to overthink and overanalyze and want to make sense of the world.
Yes, the whys.
And I think the power of doing breath work, like the holotropic breath or whatever breath work that you are practicing, is it gets you out of your mind. It gives you that breath pattern to focus on so that the energy can just flow in your body. Like there was a researcher at Harvard, and I'm forgetting her name. It's Jill, and I forget her last name. But it found that it takes like 90 seconds to metabolize an emotion, and it's usually
Yes, I've used go ahead. I've used this on the podcast before. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it takes 90 seconds to process an emotion, and it's the stories in our minds that make us get caught and live in it. And so what I find is that breath work, it can bring us back to those traumatic experiences, but it does so in a safe way where we can then just feel it and experience it and move through it in the way that we need to move through it in that moment in time, which might be different than the following day or the following week. We're constantly working and reshaping our experiences to make meaning in different ways. But I think having a breath to focus on gets us out of that overthinking and overanalyzing stories that we love to create.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny you said that, because I've used that at least 4 times in the past 2 months to bring up the point that like the things, and I think it also goes back to what I was saying, that like Dr. Joe Dispenza says is, a memory without an emotion is wisdom. If like the only reason we have emotion about an event is because of a story that we've attached to it. It's not because that emotion is still like the emotional process is a quick one. Like, it's just when we attach the stories and we make meaning out of it. Like, because that's the other thing too. I think, experiences that happen are not good or bad. They just are, but it's the meanings we attach to them. Like we label emotions. We label emotions as good or bad. There are really no good or bad emotions. Emotions just are. It's just energy. And so I think that's another key thing to keep in mind, and understanding that, it's our ego mind that attaches the stories and the meanings to all the stuff. And that's really what we're working through. Like, that's the part that's healing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm thinking about the spectrum of emotion, right? Not just the comfortable emotions, or not just the uncomfortable emotions, like the grief and the depression, the sadness, but also like the joy and the connection that is part of that human experience. And I'm like, that's just part of the human experience, isn't it? To like experience that emotion. And I think in my experience, learning to embrace that grief has actually helped me sit alongside joy in a bigger way too. It's like almost expands that vessel. I don't think that one can exist without the other.
That's it.
And so it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's also the point is you don't know what it feels like to feel the depths of joy until you've felt the depths of grief or shame or, whatever these, like you said, uncomfortable emotions are. So yeah, I think it's just, we live in a world of polarity. Like we get to experience all of it, but it's understanding that, like, dichotomy there that allows us to feel the full spectrum. And I think too, I was trying to think what book I was listening to where she talked about this. I can't remember which book I was listening to, but she talked about it, and basically saying that it's just like light cannot exist without the dark, right? And like you can't experience pain without experience pleasure, and knowing what each of those feel like. You can't experience the grief without the joy, right? So we have to be able to experience both. Like, we have to experience one to know the other. And I think too, like, when we're talking about healing trauma and healing emotions, I think if we can keep the perspective that there are obviously comfortable and uncomfortable emotions, but that doesn't make them good or bad. But if we can sit with the discomfort, like, that's where the lessons and the wisdom comes from. And then when we get to the other side is when we get to experience that, the whatever it is, the joy or whatever exhilaration on the other side of that.
Yeah, there's that book Burnout, which I'm sure you've heard of, or some listeners have, by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And they talk about grief or like any emotion as a tunnel. And there's like that light on the other side, but sometimes it's really scary walking through that tunnel.
You don't know it's going to be over. You don't know when you're going to come out.
Yeah. And you also don't like, there's going to be a light on the other side, but you don't necessarily know what that's going to look like. And that is scary for our bodies and it's scary for our nervous system. And the other thing that I love that they shared is sometimes we need someone to hold our hand to walk through that tunnel. And that's where I think our counselors come in. I think that's where the supportive people in our life come in, our trusted advisors, our friends, our families, to help us get through that tunnel. Like we can't heal alone.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think that's another piece that we tend to. I had a guy on my podcast a while back. I think might have been last year, the year before, but this wasn't the whole point of our conversation, but we talked a lot about the science of community and like what it does to your brain and how your brain functions. And I think we all know this like on a certain level, but I think we tend to discount that. And I think over and over it's proven, like, I think we saw like during the pandemic when everybody was locked away and then we had this like mental health crisis, like a lot of people were really struggling mentally. I think we can look at like, you might have heard of the blue zones before, right? The areas of the world where people live the longest. And one of the key pieces there is community. That's what helps them live the longest. So I do think that humans weren't meant to be solitary beings. Like we're community driven beings. And so I think we often discount that and think like, oh, I can just handle it myself. And especially as like you were saying, like as high achieving women, we think we can power through, I can do it myself. And, there tends to be this level of hyper independence for a lot of high achieving women and needing to prove whatever it is they feel they need to prove. But I think that science has taught us, and I think we do know on a deep level that we aren't supposed to do it all alone, and you don't have to go through the hard times alone. And I think that's part of the reason why we're here is to help each other with that and learn from each other.
And also it's not the best way to do it alone. It's actually less effective to do it alone. And it's interesting because my tendency is like, oh, I'm an independent woman. Like I want to do it myself.
Yep.
But I am constantly reminding myself that like, no, I actually need to ask people for help because that's how I'm going to be best supported from a body-based perspective. Even though like my brain and my heart sometimes wants to do it alone, I know that that's not the best thing for me. So it's interesting to begin like unpacking the layers underneath that too.
Oh yeah.
But then we were talking about another just resource for people. I'm sure you've talked about this on the podcast before, but Stephen Porges's ventrovagal theory.
Yes.
About how, in connection with other people, like it creates an alternate stress response in our body. And I think that is such an important thing to remember is that there really is science and there really is research behind letting people in and letting people hold our hands as we walk through that time.
Yeah. It's that idea of co-regulation. Like that's a real thing, being able to co-regulate. Like when I was doing my training for hypnotherapy, that was one of the big things that, in the group, it was like we had these times where it was just sessions for us to co-regulate and like work through our own, but it really is a thing. Like it is a thing. And I think, that's so crucial. It's so important. There's so many things I want to ask you. There's so many directions we keep going, but I feel like we'll be here for another 3 hours. And for our sake and everybody else's, we will start to wrap this up. So I would love for you to leave, if there's any like final points, like tips or like areas of wisdom you want to drop for people and in starting to work through these things, the dealing with kind of that inner stuff, the trauma or the stress that's affecting the physical body. Are there anything that we've left out? Or you feel like, places for them to start to work through all that?
Yeah, I think maybe it could be helpful for some people to get permission that it's not always the right time to like dive in and unpack all of the trauma. Like it's okay if it's not the right moment for you. But there always really is a moment where you come to where you're like, okay, like I'm ready to deal with this. And when you're in that place, just providing yourself a whole lot of compassion for where you got to where you are, knowing that your trauma doesn't define you, but it can help evolve your life and create purpose. And I think when we find purpose in our difficult lived experiences, we can really help ourselves and help people around us. And I think based on our conversation, we understand like the importance of community and co-regulation and supporting not only ourselves, but the people around us. And so healing yourself really does extend outward, and does have those butterfly effects. And so just reminding people of that you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your ancestors, you're doing it for your children, you're doing it for your family and your community. That it's not just you.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's something else that we often forget. I had a gal on, her episode will come out before yours. So if you're listening to this, you can go back and listen to that episode. But she does ancestral healing. And we talked about that. I think sometimes when we're in like the healing phase or like the healing chapter, and we're thinking, we can kind of get caught up in that. I don't know. I just think we forget the ripple effect, or sometimes we're just not aware of the ripple effect that has, where it's like past, present, future. And I think, we're healing, 5 to 7 generations before and 5 to 7 generations ahead. Like, it's not just about you. And I think that's even more incentive and even more reason for us to focus on our own personal healing, because it's not just about you. I mean, I think that's such a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's a big piece of it.
And God knows our world needs healing.
That's it. Yeah. And it's not just about you. Yeah. I love this. Okay. I can keep talking forever. I love this. We're so aligned in so many things. Okay. I do have one more question I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody as we wrap up. But before I do that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you and working with you and whatever it is that you're putting out in the world?
Yes. So my website is everybodybliss.com. So people can find me there, my one-on-one services, my corporate wellness services, my speaking stuff. And then I'm also on Instagram. So my handle is @everybodybliss. And I'd love to connect with anyone here. Yeah.
I'll put the links to that in the show notes, of course, so y'all can go give Miriam a follow over there and check out everything she's doing. So the last question that I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
I think stay curious. Those like little inklings and intuitions and hits that you're getting, to really listen, because I think it's really interesting and surprising what paths those can lead you down. And I think that for me, every time I've listened to my intuition, it's opened up so many doors, and it's led me to places that I never expected to be.
Yeah.
But that I'm so happy I'm at.
I love that. That's such a good answer. I know I always love hearing, because everybody has a different answer, and I always love hearing people's take on that. But I love that answer because the curiosity also, like if you're really focusing on the curiosity, it helps you kind of set aside your analytical mind that tries to figure out the why and how it's going to happen. Because like you said, a lot of times if you stay curious and you follow your intuition, a lot of times it doesn't make logical sense. So if you can like put your logical mind to the side and stay curious, then that's where it opens up the unknown. So I love that answer. It's such a good answer.
Yeah. We never let ourselves dream.
Yeah.
We're always like, how am I going to make that happen? That's not realistic. Or like, let yourself dream. You don't know where it's going to lead you. It's like, I don't want to move to Europe. Like, that's insane. Like, maybe not. It's curious. Like, maybe that just means you want to go backpacking for a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. I love that. Such a good answer. And this was such a great conversation, Miriam. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your wisdom with all of us and helping us through all of our emotional stuff. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hope, for having me on. It was such a fabulous conversation.